you get very fired up.
Mm-hmm.
We share this in
Mm-hmm.
the industrial speaking models because you lose something.
Mm-hmm.
Something fundamental and core is lost. What is lost?
And for 98% of the people, what makes them unique is also lost. It gets suppressed and hidden behind all of the formulas.
What is found in the spaces like that you work so hard to create?
What happens in the quote unquote only way it works, like the acting studio, is that you fall in love again with who you are. And you learn to create things that only you can create in the way that only you can create them. Hey there, I'm Lauri Smith. If you are a sensitive visionary, an ambitious empath, or a loving rebel, and you're finding yourself feeling called to speak, to use your voice, to share your message and spread your magic in a bigger way, from TikToks to TED Talks and anything and everything in between, and you want to find an authentic way to do that aligns with your soul, instead of trying to cram yourself into somebody else's cookie cutter box, this is the show for you. Welcome back to the Soulful Speaking podcast. I'm your host, Lauri Smith, except today I'm kind of not your host because we're going to do something a little radical, and Brian's going to take the wheel of where we go today.
This is going to be fully spontaneous. It is. It's not going to be. It already is.
It is.
So welcome. Well, Lauri, welcome. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Brian.
We're
it's great to be here.
Let's start out with, you have an interesting background. A lot of different creative paths you've been down, from acting, directing, coaching, loads and more. When did you decide that you wanted to create something like the Speaker Studio? And why?
Great question. And it feels like a continuation of our last episode, because it did not come from the shiny bits or angels coming down and singing and telling me where to go next. I had been working with people in the way that I working with people in small groups, helping them to speak soulfully in the world. I had an old program called Compelling Speaker, and I started out 2023 when people were telling me that the world was going to be back now, finally, fully from the pandemic. Like, people were going to really start signing up for things again.
Right.
And I got excited because in 2022, I already had someone signed up for the program that was going to begin in early 2023. And then I set an intention for the year, which I do every year. And that year it was alchemy. It always, most of the time it comes to me very intuitively, like it just falls in. And I'm usually aware of the more higher self reasons that this thing is coming in, and also what my lower self or my ego sees in it.
Right.
And in the beginning of 2023, I just got all on the ego side. And it was like really thinking that I was going to be sitting on a pile of gold by like January 5th. And that is not at all what happened. I had that one person.
Right.
And I postponed the program. And then I postponed it again. Eventually, I got a second person. And that person was the oldest client I've ever worked with, who then started saying things like, I've got to do this while I'm here. And that's when I shifted more into my soul-driven, service-driven, purpose-driven self. And I kind of went, I'm getting signs that maybe this is going to be the very last time that it's time to like tear it all down and start over. And I'm going to find a third person, because you really need 3. Found a third person, made it happen. It was one of the most beautiful times. And it had that feeling. I do showcases with speakers. I still do that. And people that had been coming back for the showcases every year were like, there was something about this one. Like all of them are amazing and all of the stories are beautiful. And there was an energy about this one. And
Mm.
I'm thinking it's like that closing night feeling when it's the last time you're going to do that thing in that way. It had that kind of a feeling. And I'm
What
kind of
is that
sitting,
feeling?
oh, it's the feeling of it's vibrant and alive from head to toe. And there is a bittersweetness. There's like a celebration
Mhm.
and the bittersweetness of a goodbye.
Mhm.
And no matter how much I think myself and or people in a cast with me have left it all on the playing field
Yeah.
in every performance, no matter how much I think we've done that, there's always a little bit more of like, seriously, every last whatever we had to give to that thing got given
Wow.
on that last day.
It feels like it must be kind of a heightened sense of awareness. Like, it feels tingly to me, almost like you're entering the space, savoring everything. Is that kind of what happened for you with the program? Like, I want to show up to this one more time with this kind
Yeah.
of energy?
Yeah. And it really shifted me into because I'd gotten swung over into like, I need to do this for the money.
Right.
That's not at all why I started my business. Um, and when she said that multiple times, and I really started getting it, because I was trying to surrender and be led to what was meant to come next. But my
Yeah.
mind was going crazy trying to figure it out, and it doesn't make any sense. And am I supposed to stop? And when she said that, it felt like I shifted back into my soul being in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
And I went, I don't know the details of what's coming next. What I feel like the universe is telling me with her is that it is time to do this in this format one more time
Mm.
and then say goodbye, or she would not have been put in my path. For whatever reason, it felt like it was really, really more for her than for
Mm.
me.
Well, so it turned to it got away from doing this for money,
Yeah.
and it returned to service.
Yeah. Like she needs this in the way that I do it. She needs me. She needs it at this time. So we did that. And while doing that, at a certain point, I eventually fully surrendered. A friend asked me, if you couldn't work with people in the way that you're working, what would you do?
Mhm.
And I sat with that question and I was gathering testimonials from people at the same time and really listening to what people were responding to in what I was doing.
Mhm.
And I think somebody mentioned that my superpower was holding people in safe and sacred groups. And yet, while they were in that group, I was giving them the kind of coaching that you usually only get in one on one circumstances.
Yeah.
So it's like we're getting what you usually have to work with someone one on one to get, yet we're getting it in a group. And I went, well, yeah, because that's the only way it works.
Mm.
And I heard myself say that. And then I went, oh. And people were also talking a lot about like what I now call the industrial speaking machine, all those big programs out there that everybody pretty much knows the name of that are all delivered in larger groups, and they've got formulas, and the formulas are really about, they can be delivered in large groups because it's one size fits all.
Right.
And I knew that I was not that. And
Right.
I felt like I was being led to, okay, go toward what do you really believe works? What do you really believe the world needs that isn't that thing that you've been trying to be nice to for 15 years because you
Yeah.
don't want to step on anybody's toes?
Yeah.
So the alchemy eventually became the fire. So
Mm.
alchemy is actually a process of something being burned that eventually turns into gold.
Right. Right.
And I had kind of forgotten about that part. And I was kind of in the fire. And I even formed the speaker studio because I grew up watching the TV show, The Actors Studio.
Right.
I studied in a studio here in San Francisco called the Sideways Acting Studio. I've talked a little bit about this before. And that's just what you do. Like a masterclass in theater is a small group, like 12 people was what it was pre-pandemic when you were always in person all the time.
Hmm.
And the person holding the space knows each and every one of you as intimately as they would know you if they were coaching you one-on-one.
Hmm.
And I realized speakers don't have that. I mean, I knew it, but it's like I re-realized it. And I went, oh my, in the middle of this thing that I had built, in the middle of that not working,
Yeah.
it's like the universe is telling me to go bigger.
Good question,
Mm-hmm.
if I may. You get very fired up.
Mm-hmm.
We share this in
Mm-hmm.
the industrial speaking models
Mm-hmm.
at how they, and I understand why. Part of it's because it's easier to make money that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in terms of selling speaking programs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Part of it's because people do find speaking intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the data is now, but it used to be they'd say that was the number one fear,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, and so they're looking for the pill, just make it easy. And I'm like, well, they've got a system and it's just a plug and play and I'm done. So I know what you and I push back against. And the reason we push back against it is because you lose something, is what I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Something fundamental and core is lost. What is lost?
What happens, I would say 98% of the time in those programs is it is the diet pill, the magic pill,
Yeah,
where you get some relief very quickly because of the formulas.
right.
And for 98% of the people, what makes them unique is also lost
Mm,
in the
yeah,
process.
yeah.
It gets suppressed and hidden behind all of the
What's
formulas.
better? What is found in the spaces like that you work so hard to create? When you say that's the way it works, when you talked about the 12-person program and that one person would hold space, is that's the way it works. What
Mm-hmm.
is works?
So imagine if theater schools were all this one size fits all. Here's the formula. This is how you do it. Plug and play. Put
Yeah,
yourself in the formula. Imagine if every single actor could only play the same character
yeah, yeah,
in the same way.
yeah.
Movies would not be interesting.
No, they would. Yeah, it would. Yeah, be awful.
Yeah. So, what happens in the quote unquote only way it works, like
Yeah.
the acting studio, is that you fall in love again with who you are,
Mm,
and you learn to create things that only you can create in the way that only you can create them. And every leader has a different presence and a different way that they see the world. And every speaker who will get on a stage, whether it's a virtual stage or a real old fashioned in person stage, working in the only way that works, where it's small groups and you have someone holding the space, who sees you and knows you as intimately as they would if they were working with you one-on-one. It's a magic formula for speaking and acting. Because in acting, you need playmates. If you only worked with a one-on-one coach, you don't get to do the like, we're creating a scene together.
Yeah.
And in speaking, you have a scene partner and you have your audience is actually your scene partner and the audience.
Yeah.
So doing it in a group is in part you have your scene partner, and you also have an audience of people and a group of people that are walking the same spiritual path as you are. And I said this in the first episode, and I will say it again, because part of my problem with those other programs and like how they're sneaky is that it's like surviving the fear is the end of the conversation. It begins and ends there, whether people realize it or not. It's suppressed, it's masked, it's like, I'm surviving it, and we're going to create from there, rather than speaking is one of the biggest spiritual teachers, just like health, just like relationships, just like money. And to me, moving through the fear in a way that is opening and being me and trusting myself and coming home to myself and creating from there, that's actually the beginning of the conversation.
I love the way you're framing that, because I love that the notion that the gap, it is kind of a diet pill. I'm going to help you get past the fear. Maybe better than a diet pill is a painkiller sometimes, where I'm masking the pain and I'm getting through it, but I'm not. I'm in the midst of physical therapy right now for moving through some challenges that for Bell's palsy in my voice, which is a whole other thing, as you know. But that's about sort of systemically changing things now. And that is exploring, like I was in a session earlier today, and she had me doing this new thing where I was doing this double chin bit, and she wanted me to move my head and neck in a certain way. And I couldn't move my chin, I was like, it was tremoring. And I was like, holy cow, I didn't know that was something that I could strengthen, nor did I know that it was weak. And I think what people that do what you do know, like the air you breathe, is a good thing, is the thing that people who are longing for a different experience of speaking think is sort of antithetical to that journey, which is what you're talking about, getting into the fear, iterating, looking foolish. Do you have any kind of a story that you can remember in your own experience? Maybe it's working on theater, or maybe it's in the space of the speaker studio, where you thought you needed to do it one way, and then in that playground, you got pushed and stretched such that you found something new.
That's a great question. Yeah. So what came to me and I relearned this in a deeper and deeper way, because that's how I work, the spiral of learning. I always thought that, like, the spreadsheet was the spreadsheet of like, I'm going to do a class and this is what we're going to do on every single week. That would happen to me in theater. And when I would try to rigidly hold on to that spreadsheet that I had crafted over the summer that had every moment of every class laid out, and then that's not how it would go. People would not show up. And at a certain point along the way, somebody clued me into the fact that I'm incredibly creative. So if I would just stop resisting and surrender everything would go easier for me. I taught theater in a community college.
Right.
When people are in a play or finals are coming or midterms are coming, you show up to class and nobody's there. Like half your class has not shown up. And I used to resist and try to control and like tell people what their grade, like, send out 38 emails telling people what their grades were to try to get them to come to class.
Mm-hmm.
And after somebody clued me into how creative I was, it was like I let go and I stepped back and I just started again and went, okay, so this person is here. This person is not here. This person could play the role of the person who's not here. They're an incredibly good actor who comes every single week.
Right.
And they've got a bad grade right now because the kind of left brain studenting is maybe not their strong suit.
Right.
And I just started doing things like, okay, so from this point forward, you are the understudy for that person's partner who's repeatedly not here. Learn the role, learn how to understudy. It's a really valuable skill. You get this amount of extra credit points just for understudying. And if you go on for the final, you get this many more points. And I was finding solutions like that left, right, and center. And I can feel it as I'm saying it to you. It's like everybody wins. And it completely changed. And it was like, no, that whole controlling, pre-planning, and sticking to the plan thing is not the way.
Yeah.
And my way now is more like, well, I have a plan and I'm ready to do that plan if that's the right thing when I show up in the room. I've done my homework, so to speak, because this extends to acting too. Like I've done some work to understand why my character is saying what my character says when my character says each thing. And now I'm going to show up without any preconceived notions of how you're going to do your part.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to respond.
It gets back to, again, the power of people think they're supposed to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
And in that story, trying to do it right, trying to get everybody in that room, like that was the metric.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody will be in the room and we will do the class.
Yeah.
And instead of serving the people that are there and being open to what the room is telling you and showing up fully and trusting the process. And that's so much of like what I see you do is not about teaching people how to move through the fear. It's about teaching people how to move into the field, like how to. The more you can get in the the playground, into the sand. I don't know, what is this, sandbox we're making this, Brian? What's happening? But the more you're playful, and I've seen it happen on your calls. I've seen it work. That when there's a safe space, they've stepped out of I need to do this right,
yeah,
and stepped into I get to start listening to what do I think is moving to me? And in that moment, I hear you listening to what do I really want from the people that are in the room?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the shift back in the theater days, it shifted to let's get the best performances out of the people that have chosen to show up today. And there was even a moment when I was teaching like an introduction to theater class, a college course on a high school campus.
Yeah.
In East Palo Alto, California, where I was doing the same thing in a different way. And there was a day where a whole bunch of people, they're teenagers. I now know they're neurologically wired to test the boundaries. I did not know that. It would have been helpful. They were testing the boundaries, and I was having to kick a bunch of people out of class. And I hated disciplining, and I hated sending people out of class. And I was so full of my own hatred and resistance of having to do that, that I looked up at the people that were still in the room. And this is embarrassing even now. I said, do you guys even want to be here? Or should we just work on other homework for the day? Or something like that.
Wow.
And a incredibly brave, rebellious enough young student in the back row said, why are you saying you guys? We're the ones that are still here.
Wow.
And I said, "You're absolutely right. And I am so sorry." And I told the whole room, I hate this discipline part. I actually said it to them the next day we had class. I started the class and I said, I hate the discipline thing. It is my least favorite part of the job.
Mm.
However, she helped me remember the other day that it is actually part of my job. And I haven't been doing it, which hasn't been a service to anyone. Not me, not her, not those of you that are getting kicked out. So starting from this point on, I am going to do that discipline part of my job that I don't like, because once you've disturbed the class, everybody's already suffering.
Mhm.
And I've been making it worse. So now when you disturb the class, you're going to see a very different person. It was like they heard that and they were like, yeah, are you going to keep your word? 5 people within 5 minutes. Out, 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 out. Okay, now the rest of us can have some fun.
Mm. It's one of those moments like in a movie, you're like, anyone else?
Exactly.
You know,
Bueller.
where I know we talked about when we started this, we'd probably try this experiment here for like a half hour and see what happened.
Yeah.
And thank you for
Yeah.
what you've been sharing.
Thank you.
What I think is one of the things I want to probe for as we wrap up, because I think there's a parallel. I think it's the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. I think that one of the things that artists have, because by necessity, is you cultivate the ability to see the shift, to see what the resonant piece is
Mhm.
in a way that people who have not been in that space aren't able to see quite as quickly. I see that play out when you're helping someone dial in a story they're trying to tell
Mhm.
or a talk they're trying to create, to help them identify this is the idea that
Mhm.
wants your love, that wants to be developed. How do you know it when you
Mm.
feel it?
Mm. It's following an energy that feels open and alive versus one that feels shut down.
Can you
And
paint the picture of what open and alive and shut down feel like?
yeah, there's so when I'm open and alive myself, it's like I can feel my toes. I am thinking only things about this moment that we're in. Where is
Mhm.
the aliveness and where is the tightness or the shutdown or the
Mm,
resistance?
I love that. Yeah.
And when it's me, like in that moment when that student said that, I was tensing every single muscle in my body as much as it could probably be tensed.
Right, right.
And when she said, we're the ones that are still here, and I took a breath, it was like I felt that and I let it all go so that I could actually feel alive again and then make the choices to go toward the aliveness. When I'm helping other people, it's everything from noticing where their body seems tight or not alive. Um, the words that they're saying
Yeah,
sound different to
yeah.
me. So it's like there's an aural equivalent of a neon sign around words that are important. And there can be times where someone has, in the privacy of their own home, like written out what they want to speak and they're looking at their notes.
Mhm.
So the words are alive, but the way they're coming out is not alive.
Right.
And it's so when I'm present in my own body and alive and my own stuff is not in the way, it's so easy. It's almost like breathing. Like it's hard for me
Right.
to break down in this moment. What is it that's happening?
Actually, you articulated it really well. Everything you were talking about that classroom, I'm going to paint it in a little bit different way, was so external. You were trying to control all these externals,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then in that moment where you're just like, ah, and let it rip.
Mm-hmm.
And that student said the thing, then you went,
Mm-hmm.
That's what you just gave us as a gift is notice when you're tighten.
Mm-hmm.
Notice when you release, when you're sharing a talk, that I think that neon sign that's around some words is that same kind of thing. There's a light that comes on. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows when a friend's talking about their, that when you're having coffee with a friend and you're just like, how are things going? And they're just like, oh, well, this is going on at work and this is going on at work. And well, I mean, but what else? And then they start sharing something that
Mm-hmm.
really matters
Yeah.
and the light in their eyes changes. That's the neon light, right? So I think that that was what I was wondering, what your experience, that's exactly, um, that's useful to me,
Yeah.
to be on the alert for the tension, to be on the alert for release, to be on alert for the light. Yeah,
Yeah. And I've had this thought of, so there are programs out there that suppress, and then there are other things out there um, that help people move through the fear, where they really have moved through it.
yeah,
And then it's like they're standing there and they're open and they
yeah,
have no idea that there's more.
yeah.
And I kept finding myself wanting to like say more to those folks, that it's like,
Mhm.
you worked with a hypnotherapist and the world made you think that moving through the fear was the end of the road. So you're
Right.
kind of standing there going, I'm speaking in front of crowds, and you have no idea that there's like a
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
more
yeah.
impact, more energy, more of an ability to serve people. And this is the answer if you're out there on your own and you're listening to this podcast. And that's you. You're like, but I'm not scared and I'm not suppressed. And you're really being honest with yourself. What you can do after listening to this episode to start to play is, okay, now that you're alive and you're comfortable with the sensations, start to play with them. Follow the aliveness and
Yes,
play and
yes.
move forward from there.
That's rich. Like you said a minute ago, when I'm in it, it's like breathing, it's easy. That thing that someone is feeling for, and they're like, "Oh, I get all delighted when I think about talking about that thing," or, "Oh, that feels really scary." That I swear, that's where the juice is gonna be for any audience you're sharing something with.
Yeah.
That's where the gold awaits, and we move right past it, because with the fear, we thought it was supposed to be hard, and then in
Mm-hmm.
the absence of the fear, we're just like, "Well, I'm able to do it."
Yeah.
But realizing, "Hey, if I can bring the juice
Mm-hmm.
that lives in just a little surprising, this makes me happy."
Yeah.
That's I love that. Well,
Yeah.
Lauri, thank you for your time today. Thank you for coming on the podcast. It's just a delight to have you, and thank you for the work you're doing in the world to help people find and claim and live in more of that space of noticing where the tension is that wants to be relieved and where the joy is that wants to be amplified. I think that that's exactly the kind of thing that we want here on the Soulful Speaking podcast, and exactly what we need in the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian.